So welcome. This is the Art Center East Writing Project, and we are very excited to welcome Brittney Corrigan tonight, who is the author of Daughters, among other things. And before I turned over to Amelia Diaz-Ettinger to introduce Brittney, I just want to say a few things about Art Center East. Art Center East is a member-supported nonprofit based in La Grande, Oregon, and it's been around since 1977, when it was a regional art center, and now it's more of a like a Union County Art Center. We live in 1006 Penn in a beautiful Carnegie Library building, and we run a number of classes and events. The current event coming up is our Handmade Holidays event, which runs Friday and Saturday this week, which is a maker's market. So we're encouraging folks to come on down. We have Side A and Brother Bear will be providing refreshments Friday and Saturday. So come down and get your holiday shopping done at the Art Center. I would just like to introduce my colleague, Amelia Ettinger, who will introduce Brittney. So welcome, Amelia.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. But before we start, and before I introduce Brittney, I do want to say a couple of words of a poet that we lost recently, Eric Mueller, who was a supporter of the Art Center East Writing Project, and we lost him this month due to cancer. He had beautiful poetry, and we will remember him forever. I have the pleasure of knowing Brittney as an editor for Airly Press. She is a dynamo author of 3 previous books of poetry, Breaking by Warp Tech Editions, Navigation by The Habit of Rainy Nights Press, and 40 Weeks within, published by Finishing Line Press. Brittney was raised in Colorado and has lived in Portland, Oregon for the past 3 decades, where she is an alumna and employee at Reed's College. She is currently at work on her first short story collection. And I tell you, I have read this book many times and listened to her reading Daughters. And just as the first time, I always feel excited about hearing her write. So here I give you Brittney.
Thank you, Amelia, and thanks, Nancy, and thanks to all of you for being here, and to the to Art Center East for having me this evening. Wish I could be there in Eastern Oregon, where I've never been to that little region, and that would be lovely. So maybe I'll make it there someday, but I'm glad to have all of you here virtually. So I'm going to read to you some poems from Daughters, and then a couple from my chapbook that came out earlier this year, and then a handful from my new manuscript that'll be out in 2023 from Jackleg Press. So you'll get a little variety of things this evening. So I'll start with a few poems here from Daughters, and this book is a series of persona poems in the voices of daughters of various characters from mythology and folklore and popular culture and different professions. And so hopefully I'll give you a nice little variety of voices tonight. And I like to start these Northwest readings with my Northwest daughter. This is Bigfoot's daughter. You want to believe in the bulk and brown of him reeling through the thicket, that flash you thought you saw, the eyes that spun. You want terror to walk beside you. You want the wild rush of escape. You want the story. You want to be alone with your fear. All of it true, your heart loud like a woodpecker striking the trees that seem no longer peaceful, but sentient and poised to uproot. That cry in the woods that swallows all other sound. But listen, what I want you to hear is birdsong, the lifting that comes from such beauty, the way the trills and warbles sift through the falling rain, a light on the ghosts of our breath, congregate and hover as the forest hums. My father, he is fine-furred and tawny, eyes green as fiddlehead ferns. Tangled and swift with his stories, his laughter sweeps through the undergrowth, bends you aside. I place my small footprints in his footprints, leave you stunned. If you watch the edges of his heart gentle forth through his body, soft and blurred and glowing, will you change your mind about the monster? Witness the glisten and tremble, the moon gazing down on the paws of the lake. Like that, the dark not so complete. My father, I ride on his shoulders, bring down the sky with my singing, fill your chest with a joy you can't explain. We can make you believe what you saw in the woods is something fierce and secret, the story of your own longing, but not yours to claim. All right. So I've long had kind of an infatuation with Amelia Earhart, so it was fun to imagine what Amelia's daughter might have to say. So this is Amelia's daughter. Sitting on my mother's shoulders, I can see the island the way she does. The palms and catchbird trees thick above the beach, the lagoon heart murky and blue, the coral ring our hidden home. We are two phoenixes in the sun's fierce heat. Sometimes I put on my mother's cap, press the flaps against my ears as if listening to the sea, but instead it's an echo of radio static. Trapped in the leather like ghosts, the voices talk to me in dashes and dots. Sometimes I hold her goggles to my eyes, dip my face into the coolness of the sea to watch little sharks weave circles in the shallows. Coconut crabs backtread in their callous shells. They smell me and my pockets full of seeds. I wish I could have ridden in the plane. How I would like to fly with my mother and her long-boned pilot arms. How I would like to see this island from above, the smallness of it in the bigness of blue, its bigness to the smallness of me. My secret is, I'm glad they haven't found us, won't ever know about me. I have her freckles, her thick crop of hair. I wish I had her eyes. My mother and I, we keep company with the seabirds, the strawberry hermits, the crabs, the rats, the clicking of the crabs. Sometimes pieces of her red-tipped plane wash ashore, a lever or dial, a battered aluminum patch. My mother and I, we sit in the sun. I watch the skies, I guard her for myself. My fingers smooth what's left of her bleaching bones. I am her Electra now. I open my arms like wings. All right, and there's plenty of mythological daughters running through here. Somebody mentioned Medusa at the beginning, which I'm not reading this evening, but I picked Minotaur for you this evening. So we're going into the labyrinth. Minotaurs Daughter. My mother's inner compass never falters. If the king had known her gift for navigation, he might have set her to a fitting task. But beauty veils from men the truest center, and so he sent her in to be devoured. Fear was a thing my mother cast before her like torchlight. The walls were but quarry stones, ordinary and smooth. The smell of the bull, familiar as her farm. Just another earthy beast to feed and tend. So when my father's breath fired beside her as she stepped within the labyrinth's heart, My mother simply offered up her palm, like an apple to a horse. She gentled his horns, bowed his startled head, and laid her brow to his. Violence makes of the world a maze. Consider my grandfather, the white bull, how his life was spared from sacrifice. Consider my grandmother, cursed with unnatural love, and their beast child consumed with hunger. In every civil man hides a beast. In every maddened beast sleeps the heart of a child. My monstrous father cradled me with kindly arms, tucked the softness of my curls against the coarse hairs of his chest. Now, from the labyrinth's center, we watch the architect's son fall back to earth, waxy feathers dropping away from the sun. Even the sky is a cage. My mother maps us to her. She knows the way out, but won't say. Right. I'll give you 3 more daughters. There's several in here that are after professions, which I had such a huge long list. It was hard to pick. I decided I was going to do 50 daughters, and many of them got left behind from my list, but here's one that made it in. So this is Clockmakers Daughter. This is why I like to open all things once alive. What is the body but a clock of our being, how we measure day against night or number the turns of our flesh? When my father leans over his workbench, gears laid out amidst the threaded screws, I am there next to him, assembling the bones of a mouse. Crickets chime to mark the dusky hours, and birds declare the summiting dawn. The wheelwork plied by my father's skill is synchronized to their unfailing calls. Today, I am dissecting a fish, its lovely scales reflected in my scalpel, gills spread by my forceps to inspect this miracle of breath. Sequence of ribs thin as second hands. My father's truing caliper is not so different, fashioning intricacies of brass and steel, or his peen hammer to flatten and forge. What he builds is an echo of what tick-tocks beneath all of our skins. This bird, this wasp, riveted to the perfect mechanics of wings. These hands I use to cleave. His hands on the piercing saw. The hands we make, what we can make with our hands. All right. And then there's a few of these characters from pop culture who only need their first names. This is Dorothys Daughter. It used to be something to brag on. Yes, my mother flattened and melted 2 witches. Yes, that house really did fall out of the sky. Yes, flying monkeys snatched and lifted her. Yes, the lion spoke. Yes, there really is a yellow brick road. It used to be my bedtime story. My ears chimed with the sound of ruby slippers on the golden path. I whiffed and swilled the grease of the Tin Man. My fingers ached to stroke the lion's fur, touch the crisp strands of the scarecrow's body of straw. It used to be what I aspired to as I grew. You will have friends. They will carry you. You will have luck. It will find you. You can fight monsters. You can change power. You can grow courage and brains and heart from a hole in the ground. But then came the pacing. Then descended the furrowing of brows and the wringing of hands. No, mother, there are no tornadoes in the forecast today. No, mother, there is no cackling outside in the dust. No, the room is not spinning. At least it's not spinning for me. Yes, mother, I latched the screen door. Yes, I filled a bucket of water to keep by the bed. Yes, the slippers are still beneath your pillow. Yes, Toto is still buried beside the barn. No, Mother, I can't hear the singing. No, he isn't here. I'll open the curtain. This isn't Oz. And oh, when the storms do blow in, there is no settling. She flies into the yard, her braids gone astray. The funnels, they find her. The wind, it carries her. I stand in the eye, close my eyes. I click my heels together as she lifts away from me. Pray it will bring her back. There's no place like home. All right, so one last daughter for you. This one's for that lunar eclipse that's coming our way in a couple of days that we'll maybe be able to see if the northwest clouds don't roll in. We'll see. All right, so this is Werewolfs Daughter. You never hear about the girls, though we are the ones at peace with the moon and its pull upon our bodies, our bellies brimming with lunar light. The way it bends us, turns our insides out. Howling at the moon feels like doubling in size. Shoulder muscles triangulating, throat opening, calling down stars. The power to raise goose flesh, petrify motion, stand every last hair on end. Fur growing like a time-lapse garden, a thickening mammalian boon. Pelt of shadowed hues, dense and warm and shaggy with musk. Snout lengthening into ripened flares, dervish of tail and teeth and claws. Father fights every turning, writhing in his loopening skin. It's just like you imagine it. Shredding his work shirt, pawing at the rising topography of his skin, moaning and keening and bawling into the darkness as he sprints for the trees. But it's a beautiful thing, the morphing. I shift in the water to dull the pain, naked and cold, the raucous frogs silencing with awe. My bones spin and incandesce, each nail sharpens and curves, blue eyes wax yellow and gleam. A girl wolf will rise and shake moon water from her body, not like a dog, but like a gorgeous beast, every small creature retreating before the heat of her heart. A girl wolf will rock back on her sinewy haunches to thank the benevolent moon. We'll drink before we change gears. All right, so I'm going to read you just a couple poems, 4 short ones from this little chapbook called Breaking that came out earlier this year in the spring. And this is all poems that were in response to events in the news from the past, I don't know, 7-ish years, I think, or so. It was pre-pandemic. There's no pandemic poems in here. So think back to that world before the world we now know. All right, so this first one is after the female pilot who safely landed Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 with only 1 casualty on April 17th, 2018. It's called Unflap, and it's for the pilot, Tammy Jo Schultz, and the rest of us. When all the wide world is unhinged, not just the weather with its conniption of extremes, but also the cracking open of our species, the dark fringes scrabbling their way to light. That's when we most need the pilot, the level-headed timbre of her voice through the crisp altitude of air. It's not just 149 souls on that plane as it tilts and plummets. It's all of us reaching up for the oxygen masks, all of us trying to pull one another back in. We need how she navigates us through the turbulence of fear, how she calmly corrects to our destination, how she asks for everything we'll need. We are single engine and gaping, but we're not blazing yet. The pilot, she soothes, and we are bracing. We trust her while we descend. This voice, not angelic or steel, no, she's just human. But she's carrying all of us. The blue smudged to a blur, despair now clinking wildly at our ears. We are peeled open and falling, but she is what we need. A clear, sane winging back to earth. No, not all of us, but most of us. The gravity of our hearts plunging for what we've lost, gripping onto each other, remembering what's worth saving as the mess of us lands. And this one, I think most folks will remember, is after the mother orca, Tahlequah J35, who carried her dead calf for more than 2 weeks near the San Juan Islands in July and August of 2018, while immigrant families were being separated at the United States border with Mexico. This is called The Carrying. It starts with a quote from Barbara King. Grief and love don't belong to us. We share it with other animals. The Carrying. We cannot see the bottom of a heart pooled up with loss, or chart the weight of what is empty, its heavy press. What we see is the dead orca calf balanced on its mother's rostrum, how deep she dives to retrieve it each time it falls off. We watch the circular surfacing of the female whales keeping vigil near the moonlit cove, lapped by the Salish Sea. We dare not take the orca calf away. Fiercely, we protect this ritual of carrying, empathy surfacing in our veins. We can say she's pushing through a 4-knot current with labored breaths. We can say her baby has been dead 4 days. When we say this, the blood in our own hearts leadens. The orcas are better than we are at buoying up our own. We watch how the human mothers carry their children from harm, endangered hearts pulsing with fear and love. We can say they are pushing through forbidden borders with labored breaths. We can say they have been traveling for days. What we see is the children wrenched from their mother's arms, the families in a tight circling, the sinking to their knees. The mother whale falls behind the others. We see her and weep. The tide is against us. The children slip and slip and slip away. It's good to have this book in the middle because this is the saddest book. They're all kind of sad. You know, when you're like, you're gonna write a poem in response to a story in the news, it's usually because something terrible happened, right? And you have something to say about it. And so these do tend to be a little darker, but on a similar note, this one is after the border wall construction at the site of the National Butterfly Center in Mission, Texas in February 2019. The center is home to 240 species of butterflies and is situated across the threshold of the US-Mexico border in the Rio Grande Valley, along with several other sacred sites and endangered wildlife habitats. Sanctuary. May we not be detained before we exchange our many wearied feet for the paper of wings. Instead of a wall, let there be a chrysalis, emergent shell our bodies make so we may safely eclose. A barrier by any name scars the liminal milk-weeded ground where our dead dissolve and the river eats our thirst. Do not come with your slice of machines, your monster of unscalable steel morphing in our hammock of trees. Let our liquid imaginal cells become the possibilities of color unfolding as we reassemble what makes us whole. Let not the land be divided. nor the silken clutch of our bodies, nor our hearts that hang and twist in the fight. I'll leave you with one last one from this chapbook before we move on to the current work. This one's uplifting. So this one is after the first all-female spacewalk outside of the International Space Station that happened on October 18th, 2019. This one's called Astro Sisters, which was what the two astronauts called each other. Astro Sisters. On the earth that passes beneath, leaves brighten nova-like in the cooling air, and young girls ready their costumes for Halloween. Growing bones step into flight suits with embroidered names. Transparent globes frame buoyant faces freckled with stars. Miles above, two women navigate the space station in weightless calm, their voices tethered to the woman in mission control who talks them through each task, each measured step to power the solar arrays. Like the pace of this spacewalk, we have come to this moment slowly, when the women do their work in the universe and their male crewmates look out through the glass. As the Astro Sisters climb their way back into the airlock, Girl Scout troops are rapt with attention. Teenage girls in physics class follow the live stream on the miracles of tiny screens in their palms. And the little daughters, not yet in school, watch as the hatch door opens. And where once there was darkness, now there is infinite space. All right. All right, you guys, so I'm gonna give you some, a handful of poems from my new manuscript. So this one's called Solastalgia, which is a word that's like, it's like a nostalgic yearning for, well, Earth as it was before, you know, in the midst of like sort of existential and climate chaos. So all the poems in this manuscript have to do with the Anthropocene age and climate change and extinction. And several of these, I think at least a few of the ones I'm going to read you tonight were written in a response to some of the To Sylvia Press. They do an advent calendar of prompts every season. And if you are a poet and have never seen this, go check it out. To Sylvia's Press, they're about to launch the one for this year. So it's a prompt for every day of December, and it's wonderful. And some of these poems would not have happened without it. So this first one is called The Strip Mall Changes Its Mind. At first, it took comfort in the scents from body beyond. Floral powders and cinnamon lotions mingled in the stuffy dim. It watched over so many unfooted shoes. Bright dresses called out in bold prints to suits in the dry cleaner's rack, still rows of ghosts. Then the grief set in. The conveyor belt of Sushi Town twisted like an empty gut. Its capillaries of people gone, quiet at the heart. Undone, it hardly noticed windows shattering, walls crumbling as trees limbed their way in. Sunlight on every rain-warped floor. Missing the humans with their electric bodies, wires and pipes spilled out between unmoved beams. Tireless beaks bored holes in everything. But the moss was so soft. It made the unframing bearable. Signs unlatched, bedded down in tendrilled leaves. When the fox moved in, birthed two russet kits in a thicketed shopping cart, wind like a breath, a sigh, rose past the splintered rafters, the unlit lights. And so it happened, the forgetting, painless, its tender reclaiming, dangling ceilings tiles, sloppy with stars. There's a handful of those World Without Us poems in here. There's also a handful of these, which are my sort of celebrations of unloved animals that I happen to actually love. So this one is called Possum Nocturne. Perhaps it's poor night vision that keeps us from seeing how you preen our streets, devouring what the sunlit crows have left behind. We misunderstand your mouth, crowded with keen-edged teeth that dissect and undo the flesh we are too squeamish, too unbrave to carry with our human hands. We should envy your thanatotic form, how death visits you, but then retreats. Why do we not adore your prehensile tail, how you dangle and brace and grip like the acrobats we embellish with sequins and tulle? The darkness inside your pouch, the nyctophilic eyes ripening within, should allure us, like the night sky we wished washed over our city noise, the one so thick with stars, we're less blind for its light. All right. So you all are going to be the first one to hear this one out loud. This is the one little prose poem in the center of the book that I've never read out loud before. So here we go. It's at a clip, and it's called Carpe Diem. Forget the day, how hours flatten the way rising water turns islands back to sea, how minutes tire of treading and flail their tentacled fingers above the surface, grasping at gull legs, the mired rim of a trash vortex, anything to hold on to before seconds turn blue from the effort and the whole mess siphons down. Yes, forget the day. In terms of this planet, a planet that has been here 4.5 billion years, our existence but a fraction of a percent, a blip even to the dinosaurs that tromped and scrabbled themselves across the Earth's crust, 159 million years longer than we've been digging our toes in the sand, swinging from branches, praising the soil or stewarding the land or unrocking the mountains or replacing redwoods with skyscrapers or talking about the weather or generally fucking everything up. Yes, this isn't about the day anymore. It's about reach out and grab that ice shelf. Don't let that big white bear and her two black-eyed cubs float away. Carpe Ursus maritimus, Carpe Pongo abeli, orangutans grooming their 97% identical to human genome selves in the rainforests. Please, carpe the rainforests. Carpe Panthera pardus orientalis. Carpe Panthera tigris zodiaca. Big cats in their patterned fur coats, in their slink vanishing away from us. Carpe Balanoptera musculus. Whale shark circling our dreams, vesseling its way through our paintings and poems. Carpe Dalmatibus giganteum, giant ibis, the world's most endangered and evolutionarily distinct bird. Carpe Adalaska anops, kawaii cave wolf spider that doesn't spin webs, that chases down its prey the way we are chasing our own tails now, digging ourselves a meteor-sized crater of a grave, exponentially expanding daily what we'll take down with us, dragging the aurora borealis and its tundra and permafrost after us. Yes, forget the day. Carpe, the last of the dark sky places, the quietest places on earth, the deserts with their nocturnal rhythms, flora and fauna that know what it is to survive. Yes, forget the day. Carpe noctis, carpe noctis. Let there be stars when we seize the last of the light. It's a long one. All right. And for just a couple more to close us out here. All right. So there's also a series running through the manuscript of what I call the Anthropocene Blessings. And they're short little poems written for a series of endangered plants and animals. So I'm going to read you just one of those. This is Anthropocene Blessing, California Condor. King of birds, you of the 9-foot wingspan, you who glide for hours on currents of air without a single beat, thousands of feet above the leaden earth. Scavenger ancestor, only surviving member of your genus, longest lived. May you feast on the flesh of the dead as you toss their spirits up to the sky. May the carrion ghosts look down upon your unplumaged head, your black feathered sacred form, and be healed of all that stalked them in this world. May you not be poisoned by our buckshot, seething in each carcass we leave behind. May you outgrow our captivity to hatch your single eggs in mountain cliff caves, giant redwood trees. New World vulture, may your bulbous, wrinkled visage remember how you soared over mammoths. May you be revered as virtuous, as rising back from the brink, as gathering your flock around the fallen. May you take death in your mouth and find it sweet. Find that it sustains. All right. And then I'm going to end with this little one. So this, the prompt one, this one was something about, it was the Christmas Day prompt, and it was something about writing about a miracle or something that was a miracle to you. And I had been thinking at the time about the Pando, the series, the aspen trees that are all the one big organism, one of the biggest organisms on Earth. And so that's what sort of inspired this poem, was that organism. Miraculous. When all the news is bad or worse, my ears ringing like a din of night insects, just swelter and drone. I quiet my bones with the thought of quaking aspen. Trembling giant, grove of thousands of trees, all with a single system of roots. 1,000,000 years old, bright fluttering of gold against blue. And when I think I can't take in another sorrow, each a stone stacked up like a cairn on my heart, I remember how the jaws of a snake unhinge. Its mouth opens and opens to enfold what's impossibly large, patient swallowing followed by a length of rest. And when what we've done can't be undone, hope just a speck on the future's woolly back, I jumpstart my wonder with this. The snow in Antarctica is sprinkled with the dust of ancient stars. While we hunted and gathered, the galaxy glittered and lay itself down in our light. Thanks for listening, y'all.
Thank you. That was wonderful, Brittney. Are there any questions, people? I know you have questions.
I have a question. Can you say again, Brittney, what the advent calendar with the prompts for those?
Yeah, and I can dump a link in the chat in a second here if I can find. So it's 2 Sylvia's Press, and it's their advent calendar, and they it should be like, if you just Google 2 Sylvia's Press advent calendar, it should come right up. And I think they charge like $25 or something. It goes to support the press, and you get each day of December you get a prompt, and they stay there. So if you skip one, you can go back and get it. And they're all what I found wonderful about them is that they were all so rich, and they had so many little pieces to them that I could take like just apart, because I had set myself the goal, it was during the pandemic, right, last year, and I wanted to finish this manuscript. And so I was like, this is my subject matter, and no matter what the prompt is, I'm going to cram my subject matter into it. but what I found is that it opened my subject matter, right? So I would like pick whatever part of the prompt spoke to me, and then, whatever I was thinking about. And they were just really, I thought, just really well designed, and so interesting, and so many little pieces of them that you could pick and choose from. And they have beautiful artwork that each prompt is written on, and it goes to support a really great press. So yeah, I highly recommend it if you're looking for a something to jumpstart your writing at the end of the year. It's pretty fabulous. I'm doing it again this year. So,
thank you, and thank you.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Waiting. Let's hear, Cam, you have a question.
I didn't see in your bio, and of course it's just very, very short. What led you to write? What keeps you writing?
Oh, I don't remember not writing, I guess. So, I mean, I've been writing since I was a little kid, and most of what when I wrote as a little kid, I still have some of it, and my mom made me, so my mom's here on the call somewhere, made me save others. She'll tell you, but so I wrote a lot of, little silly poems and little short stories when I was a kid. And actually there was a period of time like in middle school where I wasn't really writing much. And then it was my 11th grade English teacher that sort of rekindled my love for writing in his expository writing class. And then since then, that's just what I've been. It's always just been a real big part of my life. It sort of, I guess, comes and goes. And that, like in the years when I had little kids, I didn't write very much, but it's always just been part of who I am. And I guess my subject matter just sort of changes. And I wrote for years, really like personal, more confessional style poetry. And Daughters was what turned me like in a different direction. From that, doing all those persona poems, and I think then ended up sort of widening my interests and my style and what I want to write about. And I started doing fiction again too, which I hadn't done really since I was a little kid, so really never seriously. And that's been really pretty great too. The short story collection is on the same themes as this recent poetry manuscript, all Anthropocene, climate change, extinction themes sort of woven throughout it. So it was really interesting to be writing in two genres and at the same time on the same sort of subject matter. So I found that of late to really be inspirational to me for my writing, to be working in two genres, which for years it was just poetry. So that's been great too. Some things end up, like calling me towards fiction, and some things are calling me towards the poems, and that's fun to figure out.
Thank you.
I like the way that some of your poems bear witness for us as creatures and as a part of the creatures of the earth. And so thank you for that. And the aspens, I saw or was able to walk around in a huge aspen grove in Utah. That was like visiting a sacred place, a spiritual place. So thanks, and it was wonderful. Thanks.
Oh yeah, thank you, Gary. Yeah, I grew up in Colorado, so I miss those aspen trees. Those are, they're so. I mean, they have such a sound, and they're so visually stunning. And yeah, they do have sort of just that sacred feel to walking in a grove like that. So yeah.
Well, I've
never been to Fayetteville. Go ahead.
Hi, I think that's better. So I'm halfway through reading the collection, and I have to say that so far my favorite poem in the book is The Time Traveler's Daughter. That just struck me just really powerfully. I don't know, the way that families pull each other in different directions, like sometimes the child pulls the parents, and sometimes the one parent will pull the family in another direction. And it was just a really poignant sort of story in that poem. And I wonder if you could talk about, you know, having sustained this theme through an entire collection, what have you learned about daughters and parents?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So yeah, I mean, it took me, I wrote it over a span of 5 years, where I was sometimes really working really closely on it and other times hardly paying attention to it at all. And so over 5 years. But, you know, and it happened as sort of an accidental collection, in that I just wrote a persona poem. The Scarecrow's Daughter was the first one, just on a lark. And then I was working on the Bigfoot poem, because I was like, oh, persona poems are fun, I'm going to try some more of these. And it wasn't working from Bigfoot's perspective. So I was like, let's do his daughter. And then after I'd done 2 of them, I'm like, well, I've got a thing here. And so then I decided I would just try it. I would just see if I could do it. And so I made this list, and every time I finished one, I sort of went through the list to see who wanted to talk next. But and then, you know, it was hard to, I'm glad I set myself the 50 from the beginning, because I think I just could have done it forever because they were so fun and interesting. And, you know, I liked sort of, I'd come up with the ideas for, you know, which daughters I wanted to talk about it, but I wouldn't really know what they were about until I started. And I think that's part of like what I learned as I was going. So like, one of my favorites is Alien Abductee's Daughter. And I didn't know what she was about when I started, right? I just started writing her. And then I was like, oh, actually, this is about a daughter who has an alcoholic father. And so I would find out these things sort of as I was writing them. And one of the things I personally like about the poems is that I feel like there's a lot of them have sort of these two levels to them, where they seem to be about one thing, and maybe they are about that, but then there's something else going on underneath. And for me, that was the most fun to write, was like, what's the going on underneath? What's the story of this daughter that's different than what you might expect of her? Or, you know, what is she trying to overcome, or what is she enjoying? Because not all of the daughters have poor relationships with their parents, right? Some of them are very close with their parents, like the Sandman's daughter is, you know, they're doing that work together. And so so that was really interesting for me to sort of figure out what I wanted to say about parenthood, about daughterhood as I was writing. And I sometimes get asked too about if I have a daughter and how that influenced the poems. And I'm going to preempt that question in case it has to. It's related in that after as the book was in production, and it was originally going to be dedicated to my younger kiddo who came out as trans and non-binary during the course of that production year of the book. And so so that led me to write a new poem that ended up going into the book, and I pulled another one out to make space for it, about like what does it mean to have a child who used to identify as a daughter and no longer does, and how does that change my relationship to this book and to these poems, and what daughterhood actually means. And so that was also a really interesting part of the process for me, was sort of, I don't know if that had happened before I wrote the book, I don't know if I would have written the book, right? It wouldn't. So that's interesting for me to think about too. Would I have done this project if I didn't have a kiddo who identified as a daughter at the time I was writing it? I don't know, but I'm a daughter, so maybe I would have, so yeah. It's a long answer to your question.
I enjoyed the way you read the sequence, the way you sequenced the poems tonight, how it made me think of it made me aware of the touch points, I guess, between myth and the news and history and stuff. And I appreciated that. I think it was in the Minotaur poem, you said violence makes the world a labyrinth. I think
violence makes the world a maze. Yeah,
a maze. Yes, excuse me. Yeah, that was awesome. But so here's my question for the daughters poems. Did the research that you had to do, did it look different than research you would do and normally do during the typical course of writing a poem? I don't know if that's a question or not.
No, it totally is. And I love the research. So, and that's one of the things I love about fiction. I do an insane amount of research on my fiction with all the sciencey stuff in it. I tended in general, before I did these poems, to do less research when it came to poetry, but I really enjoyed the research aspect of writing these poems. And the ones that were sort of the most fun for me were the professions ones, and like researching like the clockmaker that I read tonight, but there's also a taxidermist and a mortician, and there's a few other professions in there. And that was super interesting to research and think about. There's a surgeon in there too. Think about what would it be like to have somebody like that as a parent, and then researching all the different tools of the trade and trying to work those in and really investigate the imagery around them. So that was super fun. And then, yeah, I did do, I had to remind myself of some of I've always been really interested in mythology and folklore and fairy tales. And so those stories were already there in my head, but trying to go deeper with them and into the myths, and then deciding how I wanted to revision that and take it further. The research was super, super fun on those too.
So we have one more question. Who'd like to be last? Oh, the pressure.
I don't bite yet. No.
All right, well, hearing none, let's give Brittney a round of applause. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We are going to just take a little 5-minute break, and we'll come back and with an open mic. So if there's folks that would like to read in the open mic, just throw your name in the chat and I'll put a list together.